Welcome to Intelligent Human Leadership, leading yourself and your team. Do you ever find yourself grappling with a lack of confidence in your team? Or battling the relentless waves of concern and fear? Are the pressures to meet client expectations and the burden of missed opportunities weighing you down? On this podcast, you'll discover the strategies and insights that will reignite your team's morale and help you find the harmony and knowledge you seek to propel your business forward. Here, we explore innovative ways to reignite your creative spirit and achieve greatness, empowering you to lead with intelligence, compassion, and resilience. If you're ready to dive deep into your core of leadership challenges and be guided toward success, here's your host, founder of Steward Your Business, David Carr.
Welcome back to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I am your honored host, guide, fellow journeyer with you as we become that most intelligent human leader. Yes, we all can be. I know it seems kind of crazy in today's world of AI, artificial intelligence, and other things, but really what this podcast is about is really building on relationship. And as we understand and appreciate ourselves, we can have a much greater influence and effect on those that we truly care around us in our lives. And so I'm picking up on our last podcast episode where we talked about the nice guy syndrome, which I have suffered through. And if you missed that episode, go back, just check out nice guy syndrome. We talked a lot about the internal struggles that you face when you're coming in that and you're dealing with that. There's a lot of challenge with authenticity, and how do we, deal with self-doubt, conflict, and oftentimes we've kind of adapted ourselves in a way of living and being that hasn't really to our benefit. It's undermined our influence. And so in this episode today, my hope is as you listen in and that you're going to take actionable knowledge that I have acquired and applied over my many years and learning from other coaches and guides, where you can have just an amazing influence with all of those in your life. And so we're going to focus on that, building on influence and that assertive leadership that we talked about in the last episode. We wanted to move from being passive or passive aggressive or even aggressive. Most nice guys are passive or passive aggressive. And so what we want to do is move into a place of assertiveness, confidence in who you are and how to get the best out of yourself, number one, and number two, those around you. And we're going to use 4 pillars that we're going to review today. We're going to look at your character, we're going to look at your chemistry, competency, and your credibility. Again, we're going to look at these 4 areas in what I call the influence model. This is something that I've learned and applied through Giant and the 5 voices. You guys have heard me talk about the 5 voices. It's just a tremendous tool, and one that I'm a staunch advocate for because it's made such a lasting impact on myself and others that I get to work with. If you missed that and you want to go check it out, you just go to stewardyourbusiness.com/5 voices. There's a free assessment there. You can find out more about it or message me. There's some great feedback on this last episode, and so I wanted to dive deeper here on some of the external pressures to you that you might find yourself being this nice person, thinking that this is actually helpful and positive. In reality, it's actually possibly undermining you in one or more areas I just mentioned: your character, your chemistry, your competency, and your credibility. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, if you don't know, I also broadcast this video as well, and I'm going to show you what I call the influence model. I'll describe it to you as well. But I like to throw in visuals from once in a while so that you can have a better understanding for those of you that are more visually oriented in addition to those listening in. So key points today that I want to talk about on the podcast is how do we navigate team dynamics with influence? So the influence model is one that there's walls of self-preservation out there, okay? And so when walls go up, what happens? So we get defensive, we are not open to new ideas. We can actually be very like I said, aggressive or passive aggressive with each other because we're in defensive mode. So what I want to do, the first thing I want to talk about is trust. Really, this is all about how do we build trust in teams. So important to productivity, to your engagement. And one of the questions you may ask, or is asked of you, is, do I trust you? Do I trust this person? And if you're a leader of integrity, you're going to be able to place the team's interest above your own self-interest to build lasting trust. Remember, if we're the nice guy, we're trying to make myself feel good. Instead of we're shifting that here, and we're looking at how do we help our team? How do we make them successful? And so we start to then realize, okay, I can lower my wall of self-preservation in my own self-interest in an effort to build influence and trust within the team. So I'm going to jump in there, pull from my history, my background here. And this is one where you have to acknowledge when you have fallen and when you have lost trust or or fumbled it away at times. Recently, I should say, in the previous company I was working with, a couple of years ago, one thing I realized was there was times where I undermined my trust. And one of those where we were doing a very big project, and I was confident in how things could be done, and I had a path forward, but I didn't build trust with others. I was kind of thinking about how I was going to do it. This was a big, long project, linear project, had lots of components to it, and so one of the stakeholders, the owner of the company, I had not engaged her, and unfortunately, I violated that trust. And now we worked through it over time when we rebuilt the trust, but I was not intentional in that. And this is part of my voice as a connector. Sometimes I leave out steps. I'm future oriented, and some of the things I was not as present oriented there. And so I had to own that, embrace what happened, the facts of what it was, and then I started to be able to rebuild trust as I was more intentional with reaching out to other team members, getting feedback more regularly, even though it was my natural way of being on some of those things. I had to learn. The 5 voices, if you're not familiar with it, it's really inclusive, and there's this idea of nature. We have naturally gravitate to a certain way of, and there's also a choice, if you will, and a way of we nurture some things. Now, it's best that we can stay in our natural way of being, but we also acknowledge that there are times where we may have to choose a certain way. And there's a variety of reasons in that. I can't get to that in the podcast today, but you can definitely go back to previous episodes, just look at 5 voices, and you'll see a lot more on the past episodes there. But here is a big important thing about character, okay? Character counts. Character is one of these big things here, again, of the big 4 that we can help overcome walls of self-preservation. And I'm going to throw up on my screen here for those of you that are following along on the video, a way of visualizing this. And so one way you can do this is seeing this idea of what you'll see is character right there, and chemistry and competency and credibility. And this is a way that through these 4 together, we can then lower self-preservation because we feel like, oh, there's trust being built, right? These all together are building trust. And so I'm going to go deeper into these here, but I want to just give you a visual here where we're going in this influence model. So character is one of these key areas. So make sure you apply this character filter. This is an external thing. We talked internally last time about how you're making decisions, how do you prioritize the team and the project, and make sure it aligns with the long-term goals. Don't be short-sighted in your being niceness, or don't undermine yourself. Don't self-sabotage here. This is a real key component of the model, is you want to look at your character and make sure that you're building trust with your team. Now, continuing on with those team dynamics, is we need to look at how do we use the two other components. There's chemistry and credibility and competency. I'm gonna focus here for a moment on chemistry and competency. So chemistry may come more natural again for some of you. This is the importance of personally connecting with team members. Do people like you? Now, some people could say, I could care less if they like me. Again, that's true. However, your ability to build trust is going to be diminished. So if they like you, they appreciate you, they understand who you are and what you're contributing, and they say this person has value, they have something to offer. When you take time to listen and show empathy, and you're starting to, again, we're turning it from the inside to the outside. So we're starting to take our eyes off ourselves, and we're starting to look at other people to foster positive relationships and create an environment of loyalty and cooperation. Think about how that changes the dynamics in an organization when you start to do that. Now, you can do the opposite too. What I found is if you have disregard for people and you just throw them off, you don't care what they think. I'm not saying that you should, this is the only one, this is a component, remember, it's not the only one, but I want you to consider this, is that, well, how can I show up in a way that fosters positive relationships? I can listen, I can show empathy. Doesn't mean I necessarily agree with all of what they have to say, but chemistry means it's creating a framework, it's creating a container, if you will, for those to trust you, for those to find a way of saying, hey, I like this person. I think that they are looking out after my best interest. You tie that with competency, and obviously we have to be competent in what we're doing. If we're not competent, that certainly that undermines our influence. And we've seen incompetency, obviously, in our lives, all of us, and we've shown incompetency, because the reality is, if we've seen it, that probably means we can recognize it because we've been incompetent ourselves. Now, we've got to own that and own our competency. Where do we have competency and where do we don't have competency? That's one thing I've had to learn over the years, especially when I became a manager and started leading. I had to recognize I'm not competent in all areas, or I have a certain level of competency, and beyond that I don't. And so there's nothing wrong with saying, this is to the extent of my competency. This is the extent of where I feel comfortable and understand. I'm moving into an area that I'm not as comfortable or aware. Now, when you tell that with a team, at least they have some understanding, versus somebody that just charges ahead and then really lacks the true competency there. When you combine the two, it's a very potent mix of chemistry and competency. Again, when we add all these together, I'm going to show you how this influence model is going to ultimately help you overcome the wall of self-preservation. But what happens is we usually focus on one of these areas, maybe two, but not all of them. And again, our natural voices may show up in one of these more dominantly, if you will, than others. For example, chemistry for me as a connector voice, generally speaking, is pretty natural and pretty easy to do. I can open up a conversation, I can start to listen, I can foster those relationships. Sometimes, like I said, competency can be a challenge. So for an example, we had challenges with some deliverables and a QA/QC process. And I realized as the connector, I kind of overestimated. I was very positive and very thoughtful, like, hey, we could do this, we could cover this, but I was really too optimistic. And so it undermined my competency in that I overestimated what the team could do and their capacity. So you need to be aware of where your limitations are or where your tendencies are. We've talked about this in past episodes in the Know Yourself to Lead Yourself tool. Again, the better that we understand ourselves and can express that clearly to the team, the more likelihood you're going to have success in influencing them. And so when you put this together, you're going to have a more engaged team that is more positively impacted for project performance. So one way I did this, and I highly recommend this if any of you are a supervisor or manager, is that you schedule informal check-ins with your team members. Find out what's going on, listen to them. In today's distributed workforce, where we're all over the place, are you intentionally finding out what's going on with your team members? Do you even meet with them in person? There is a time and a place for both. We're in this place right now. When I'm recording this is the end of 2024. Here we are in October, almost November. We're really still struggling with the distributed. Some people say remote working. I was corrected today by a colleague, and she was really saying distributed workforce model is a better way of describing this. But we're not coming all into a centralized office. We don't all know what's going on with each other, and so the influence can be weakened there. So let's look about how you can be more intentional here. I want you to think about this as you listen to the podcast. How can I think about checking in with folks? How can I build chemistry there? Also, let's look at opportunities where we can support our team in technical challenges and knowledgeable guidance. That's where you can hire me also as a consultant. I come in as a coach and consultant. For those of you in the AEC industry, architecture, engineering, environmental consulting, construction, this is an area I've spent over 20 plus years helping people navigate. So I can infuse both coaching and consulting in this arena, but find opportunities to make sure your team is competent and prepared, and again, knowing your limitations, like who do I need to bring in? Where's the resources there? So we built initially, like I said, we've got to have character. It's character counts, having that foundation of trust. And then we're looking at adding chemistry and competency. And I mentioned one other one in there. And we need to look at your credibility. So we have a character, our chemistry, our competency. These all work together. And when we have all of those with credibility, meaning the credibility is, the question that comes up is this relevant to me? Why does this matter, right? Well, you need to make sure you align your competencies with the unique team needs or project and develop relevance for their insights and adapt to solutions that are specific to the changes and challenges you're facing. If you're not doing this, this is going to be really problematic. And I'll give you an example of this for me. Early on, I was managing a huge project for Southern California Edison called the Hatchabee Renewable Transmission Line Project. We started this huge project, and one of the things I realized that I needed to support my lead monitor in this case. I had a biologist, senior biologist, amazing woman, just jumped out there, started directing the team and doing an amazing job. But what happened was I was managing the project. She was super stressed out because she was doing so much work trying to get all the schedule done, and it was just too much work. We didn't know until we started the project what was all entailed. And so what happened was I needed to insert myself there in this case and look to adjust how the project was being run at that point, because there was a lot of challenges with construction, communication, and I needed to get buy-in not only from my lead monitor, who was working really hard by herself and trying to coordinate all this, but I had to work with Southern California Edison. I had to work with contractors, and we had to work collaboratively to get the job done. Now, thankfully, we were able to work through it. It took time. We had some kinks. There's lots of stories I could tell you on this one project alone. But we learned how to build credibility with one another, and again, be relevant. And you may have heard me talk about this in my Warrior talk about the living by the code. Be real, raw, relevant, and get the results. These all infuse together, and I love, as a coach, as a guide, I love to be able to bring these and walk you through them, because a lot of it's a lot to understand and know. I've spent decades now learning and becoming better at leading myself so that I can help others and that we can have stronger dynamic relationships. So as we wrap up the episode today, as we're coming to the end of this podcast episode, I always like to say I can't solve everything in a podcast episode, but I can give you some key nuggets, hopefully some words of wisdom that you can take with you today, and you can take an actionable insight and apply it. I want you to consider, and I'm going to throw it back up on the screen for those of you that are listening in. You can go back and watch this on the YouTube channel. But I want you to go back and look at this, again, model of the influence model, where we have you, and you're on the other side of the wall of self-preservation, where we have getting that chemistry, getting that character lined up, adding the competency and credibility together. When we have those all in the green, if you will, when we've built that up, it's a go. The wall of self-preservation is going to be dropped down. You don't have to be the nice guy. You don't have to be all, this fake, I'm just getting along with everybody. We want you to be real. We want you to be authentic. We want you to be assertive and be this leader in whether it be environmental consulting or elsewhere, where you have influence because you have built character, you've had chemistry, you've built competency, and you have credibility. That wall of self-preservation here that goes down, your influence impact goes up, and it continues on beyond to one relationship to the next and to the next. That's what we want to help you do, is apply these 4 influence pillars, if you will, in your teams, in that when you are intentional about this, you'll be able to handle the difficult conversations that come up. You'll be able to enhance your team accountability and project success, really increasing both your capacity and your production capacity. Well, those things should all go up when you're being intentional in this way. And I want to really encourage you to not get stuck. If you're stuck in one of these areas, well, that's why I'm here. That's why Intelligent Human Leadership exists. That's why I started Steward Your Business, was I wanted to help more people, more individuals, more teams get healthy, get in the right place so that they can do what they do best, wherever that may be for you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thanks for your comments and likes. It means the world to me. But really what is most meaningful is that you actually are getting the help that you need. You know you're not alone. You know that there's someone there as an advocate for you that wants to see you succeed and get better on the other side every day. Not just in your work, but in your personal life, whether it be your marriage or with your children or those in your neighbor. But when we do this intentionally, we will all win together. But it starts with somebody's got to lead the way. And I had to start with me. And I'm not done yet. There's still more work to be done, and that's why I'm committed to coming and bringing you this podcast week after week, providing the resources I do through the YouTube channel or whatever social media channel that you prefer. Follow along. I'm on them all pretty much. And if I'm not on one, let me know, and I'm happy to try and get on there and share with you. But I truly appreciate hearing each and every one of you, and I appreciate those of you who come back week after week to learn more and to know when you listen to this podcast, you're not alone. You are becoming that most intelligent human leader, and I'm rooting for you, and I can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, take good care, everybody.